Ezreal has been at the bottom of the AD carry tier list for a while now. His mana requirements means he has to build a tier early, which keeps him weak in lane. His main source of damage is a spell, which can't take advantage of the meta crit builds. For the most part, Ez has been competitively irrelevant in almost all stages of the game, until Jungle Ezreal started stomping solo queue. With the strange pick now appearing on the world stage from teams like WE and Cloud9, let's take a look at why Jungle Ezreal began, how it works, and the reason it's not used more often.
Time for a true display of skill.
This episode of Tactics is brought to you by Gamer Sensei. Get one-on-one private coaching and pro tips from challenger players to win more and climb in ranked. Follow the link on screen and enter the code 1KFree to get a $10 credit with your first lesson. Ezreal recently received 2 critical buffs. In patch 7.15, his Mystic Shot cooldown at level 1 went down from 6.5 seconds to 5.5 seconds. In 7.17, the AD ratio on Mystic Shot went up from 1.1 to 1.25. Both of these changes have little effect on lane Ezreal because he's not focused on early harass. He needs to manipulate the wave in CS, so even with these buffs, he's still limited by mana. But in the jungle, where Ezreal has access to blue buff, these buffs have a huge impact. Mystic Shot lowers all cooldowns by 1.5 seconds when it hits a target. It also stacks Ezreal's passive, which increases his attack speed by 10%, stacking 5 times. With a lower Q cooldown and faster overall CD reduction, Ez can stack this faster than before, significantly increasing his clear speed and putting him ahead of other junglers as long as he avoids camps that require AoE. As for that AD ratio buff, it mostly comes into use with Ezreal's great jungle itemization. Jungle Ez can take blue buff for himself, which means he can spend his first 750 gold on combat stats instead of a tier. More specifically, he puts it into one of the most gold efficient items in the game, the Skirmisher's Saber with Warrior Enchant. For 650 gold, Ezreal can turn his Hunter's Machete into a saber, upgrading his Smite to Challenging Smite. This allows Ez to use Smite on champions, reducing their damage to him by 20% for 4 seconds, as well as applying 78 true damage burn when you auto-attack them. So as long as you have Smite up, Skirmisher's Saber is the most cost-efficient item for early game fighting, bar none. On top of that, the Warrior Spike on Ezreal is truly terrifying. Once your Saber is complete, grab a Coalfields Warhammer, toss in 525 combined gold, and you'll have 60 more AD. Thanks to his scaling attack speed passive and 1.25 total AD ratio on his Q, Ezreal benefits hugely off this flat AD, and he can get it extremely early. This means a level 6 jungle Ezreal can have 138 AD and a Mystic Shot that hits for 250 damage before resistances. This is incredibly high for a skill shot with 1150 range and a base cooldown of 5 seconds. To put this power into context, in a game where Ezreal gets an early kill or 2, this Warrior Spike is happening as early as 7 minutes and 30 seconds before players have a chance to build more health. This build path gives Ez a significant early spike advantage against current meta junglers, who will typically build a Cinderhulk. Warrior users get immediate power, while Cinderhulk's passive multiplier becomes more effective in later stages of the game. Plus, the health provided by Cinderhulk is equivalent to a giant spell, yet costs 500 more. Cinderhulk by itself is not enough to mitigate Ezreal's damage either. Only when combined with armor, most notably Ninja Tabi, do we see a reasonable decline in Ezreal's damage. This requires another 1100 gold investment from the tank, giving Ezreal a defined window of strength. But that's not the only advantage jungle Ezreal has over meta junglers. In the NA Gauntlet, the list of most banned and picked junglers were Gragas, Sejuani, Jarvan, Maokai, Rek'Sai, Nidalee, and Zac. All of these junglers have very telegraphed abilities that a skilled Ezreal can avoid with an arcane shift. This gives Ezreal outplay potential over all of them, forcing them to avoid early one-on-ones. It's also important to remember that Ezreal's early game is defined by his level 2. He only needs access to his Arcane Shift and Mystic Shot to be an effective, and more importantly, unpredictable ganker. Take these examples from SKT jungler Peanut and Team WE jungler Kandi. He can look for a gank on an overextended laner. He can invade the opposing jungler at his second buff. He can 3-camp and gank a lane that is playing as defensively as possible. And when he can work with his allies, he can dive towers with a clean turret aggro juggle. So to summarize, Jungle Ezreal can clear faster with his lower cooldown Q, doesn't need to buy a tier thanks to blue buff, will damage spike earlier than meta junglers thanks to the Saber plus Warrior build, can dodge meta jungler CC attacks fairly easily, and has a lot of great early gank options. But even with all of this, we don't often see Ezreal in competitive play because he thrives in the chaos of solo queue. Ezreal is most relevant in early game, where he can pressure laners with high damage ganks and powerful sieges. His damage doesn't scale so well into late game, so he needs to snowball early. A coordinated pro team will look for ways to shut down Ezreal's early pressure. If Ezreal doesn't have forward momentum, once laning phase ends, he'll be less valuable than almost any other utility-based champion. In the recent Worlds playing game of Lion vs WE, Lion show us how to play around this, and although they don't win the game, they show ingenuity in predicting Ezreal's early pressure. Ezreal clears so fast that he can make it to the blast cone as Lion's jungler starts his second camp, which would leave Kha'Zix at low health with no cooldowns. Ahri prepares for this invade by leveling Kha'Zix E second and taking an obscure path from red to blue. He hugs his base walls instead of pathing directly to blue. With this longer route, the Lion jungler can regen more of his health and delay his arrival just long enough to catch Ezreal. Ka immediately leaps onto him for the isolation damage and calls for a collapse. Because Lion anticipated the invade, their laners establish priority and are able to rotate first. After the successful counterplay, Lion looked to utilize the one ability with higher burst than Ezreal, Kha'Zix Q on an isolated target. After Ezreal's successful gank on bot, Ahri anticipates Ez to come topside after a recall. Since there is minimal vision this early in the game, he's able to sneak into the enemy jungle and wait for Ezreal to face check into a brush. Even though these are great examples of dealing with a jungle Ezreal, we have to note that Kha'Zix doesn't translate his lead into much of anything, allowing Ezreal to farm up until his item spikes. Ezreal has seen victory twice at the World's play-in stage now. Given all we know about the new role, is this indicative of his strength in competitive play? Or did he simply win because his entire team outclassed their opponents? Will Ezreal see success against the top-tier world champions? Find out next time on Dragon Ball Z! Book a lesson on Gamer Sensei and learn to carry your team to victory. First-timers can use the code 1KFREE at checkout to get $10 credit. For more league interviews and analysis, subscribe to our channel. You can also find stats, discussions, and more on our website and mobile app at blitzesports.com.